Welcome to episode 21 of the Kevin Rooke Show. Today's conversation is with Noah's CTO, Hussein Badakhchani. In our conversation, we discussed exactly what Noah is. They're branding themselves as the money app of the future. We discussed some of the different features and different mechanics in Noah's app that I honestly haven't seen in any other Bitcoin apps to date. We also discussed how you can spend and save and earn and pay Bitcoin in Noah, and they're planning to release this app in private beta early 2022. So we got a little glimpse into exactly how some of these features will work. If you're enjoying this show so far, and if you like this episode, the best way you can let me know is by sending in sats, sending in comments, sending in questions over the Lightning Network. I read every comment, and this month we are at a record high number of sats sent in. Actually, we had a enormous sat payment today. We'll get to that at the end of the show in the lightning round. But quick thank you to everyone who has sent in sats so far. And before we get into the episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor. That is Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. You can check them out at voltage.cloud, and we will have more from Voltage later in the show in the lightning round. Hey, thanks for joining me on today's call, Hus. How about we start off with a discussion about what you're building at Noah and why it's important?
Sure, Kevin, it's a pleasure to be invited to speak on your podcast. So what is Noah? We try and describe ourselves as a crypto-native neobank. And I think that description is important for me. I come from a fintech background, and cryptech for me is separate to fintech. Definition is really straightforward for me. If you're building against the blockchain as your primary means of reconciliation in the products that you're building, you're cryptech. If you're really focused on building against a traditional financial system and making it easier to use for ordinary people, that's fintech. So we're a crypto native neobank. We're offering products around earning, and I think it's important to get this kind of roadmap right, as we discussed a little bit earlier. We're going to provide products around earning, saving, sending, and paying. And the order is important because of the target market that we're targeting, the market segments that we work in. Our founders have a lot of experience in frontier and emerging markets, and that's informed our product roadmap significantly. So the company is predicated on the principle that if you can store value, grow it over time, and then transfer that value across space without friction, you ostensibly have the means to lift yourself out of poverty. That's the tools that you need to do that. And that's what our founders have observed in these frontier markets. So people are poor, not because they're lazy or stupid. They're poor because they don't have the ability to accrue capital over time. They're running just to stand still, and the governments are repressing them financially. So if you're in, let's say, Pakistan or Turkey, you don't necessarily have access to the savings vehicles, the savings instruments that we have in advanced economies. You don't have access to blue chip stocks. You can invest in the local economy, like stock market, if one exists, but they tend to be pretty volatile and also, just dubious in terms of their nature. A lot of the companies that are registered in some of these stock markets are not the best investments, as opposed to, let's say, at least the UK and the US stock markets are very tightly regulated, so you have a means of storing value. So we decided, our founders discovered Bitcoin, I guess in the last couple of years, so they're latecomers. I've been into Bitcoin since I learned about it on slashdot.com at the end of 2009, and I've been playing around with Bitcoin ever since. So Bitcoin really represents the best asset class anywhere on the planet for anyone to invest their savings in. That's what we believe. And I think the last 10 years have proven that demonstrably. And it's objectively a fact that if you held Bitcoin for the last 5 years, you'd be far wealthier than if you hadn't. If you put that money into a bank account, for example, you'd be down by this stage. Putting Bitcoin at the heart of a crypto-native neobank to deliver services around earning, saving, sending, and paying is what Noah wants to do.
And how did you come to realize that building on Bitcoin could give you all of the tools you need to tackle all these initiatives, right?
like if you want to help people earn and save and pay, how did you come to realize that you could do all of it on Bitcoin?
So I think if we look at incentivizing behaviors, which is very much baked into Bitcoin, the incentives and the way the Bitcoin protocol works is all really around the security comes from incentivizing the right groups of individuals to behave in certain ways. We applied that principle ourselves. So let's talk about the savings incentives that we're going to put in place. You're probably aware that there's a lot going on in the DeFi space at the moment. There are a lot of ERC20 tokens on Ethereum, for example, that people can yield farm on, that kind of thing. We've come up with a slightly different approach to this so that we can essentially create a liquidity pool, which is funded either by our own operational funds or by different foundations. And what we will do is mint a certificate that will provide whoever we issue that certificate to with a guarantee of an annual percentage rate based on a duration, a number of days, and a time limit. So that is the duration, and a cap, a US dollar value cap on which that particular certificate can be applied to incentivize saving. So if you would imagine, I'll give you a concrete example, you could say a 10% APR with a 90-day duration on a $1,000 cap. That minted badge, I've been calling it a NOAA badge for the time being, but we'll probably change the name, has a value. It has a value of $24.66. And what we will do is we don't want our customers to lock up Bitcoin with us. We're providing a non-custodial wallet, and that's important for regulatory reasons. What we want to do is to incentivize behaviors that will allow our customers to earn that certificate, the NOAA badge, and they can then turn it on and off depending on how much balance they have in their NOAA wallet. And we will issue the APR earnings onto their Bitcoin account. So I think it's quite novel in the way that we're doing that. The funding in the liquidity pool is US dollars. Now, in future, we could fund it potentially in Bitcoin as well, and that gets really interesting. But as we start in this process, I think we want to make sure that we can honor every promise that we make with these certificates to allow people to begin earning on their Bitcoin. But I think what's more interesting is that we want to be able to solve a very particular problem, and which separates frontier markets and emerging or advanced economies. And what we want to do really is build an exchange that allows people that are time rich and capital poor to be able to exchange with people who are capital rich and time poor. And how do we do that? That's the problem that we really want to fix, building on top of a Bitcoin rail. And I think these certificates that we can mint ourselves, and eventually one day I hope we can mint them directly on the Bitcoin blockchain, and that's something that we're looking at. But they can be exchanged. We will create a NOAA market space where NOAA will be the market maker. So people who are earning these NOAA badges by carrying out actions that we're incentivizing them to earn NOAA points that they can exchange for these things. If you can imagine, if you're in a frontier market, you probably don't have $1,000. So why would you do anything to earn one of these? Well, the idea is that you can sell it to someone in an advanced economy that does have $1,000 and that does want to take advantage of the APR that we're offering. So I think we create that market space, we bridge that gap between those two groups of individuals that are time-rich, cash-poor on one side, cash-rich, time-poor on the other side. Does that make sense?
Interesting. I have so many questions about this. This is fascinating. It's definitely a novel take on building on Bitcoin. Can you explain more about how the liquidity pool works? I think some listeners may be familiar with some liquidity pools in the Ethereum ecosystem, where they kind of like had their first moment. How does that work in the context of NOAA?
Yeah, initially it really is just a safeguarded account, essentially. So we will be funding with our marketing budget the liquidity pool. Later on, what I'd like to do is consider options of actually creating something on the Bitcoin ledger directly. That so Noah will decide we want to spend $1,000 on marketing activities rather than give the money to Google for Google ads, which is what a lot of companies do today in order to acquire customers. My preference would be to be able to lock this in on the Bitcoin ledger and put something akin to a smart contract. And I think maybe with Taproot, we can potentially build something interesting around this. But the idea is that it's entirely transparent and anyone can look at the value of the liquidity pool and compare that with the value of the Noah badges that we've minted that represent that can only be created from the value that's stored in the liquidity pool. So day one, it's while we prototype the whole process, it literally is a safeguarded account in a traditional financial institution. But as we demonstrate that the product works and take it out of proof of concept, we'll build it directly on the Bitcoin blockchain.
And then how do you go about distributing the badges and how do people go about earning them?
That's a great idea. So great question. There are a number of ways of doing this. One of them is to earn Noah points. And what we want to do there is, again, incentivize behaviors that we think lead to better life outcomes. And at the same time, we have to be commercially viable as an organization. So it could be simple things like engaging in social media to help us with our marketing campaign. That could earn you some Noah points that you can exchange for a badge. One of the we definitely want to be able to gift these as well. So we would invite institutions that are trying to increase financial inclusions to put liquidity into our liquidity pool and incentivize behaviors for again any individual that's time rich and cash poor can engage in an activity that, let's say, the charity wants them to engage in, and they can earn points and exchange those for the tokens, or they could be gifted directly as well. So if you wanted to incentivize saving behaviors for someone, you can just gift them one of these badges. One of the things that we will do is potentially I don't want to use the term airdrop because it's not the best term that you can use, but we call them invitations. So Noah will create invitations and give those to everyone who already has a Noah account. Now, as the Noah customer, you can't use that for yourself, but you can invite someone else with the badge to join Noah, and they can begin. If they have savings, they can begin saving, or if they want, they can sell the badge back to someone else on the Noah community and begin earning, depending on their personal circumstances. And then there's one other way, which I think is really interesting as well. We want to this is all about incentivizing people to save. That's the underlying kind of principle. And one of the things that we want to do is not just individual saving, but groups or communities saving. So one of the things that we want to put forward is like a Noah tribe, for want of a better term, where if a community has a particular savings goal, and that could range from infrastructure for clean water to energy, whatever, we can work with that particular Noah community to propose what the badge could look like and what's required, what the saving goal is. And then we can work with people in the more advanced economies to fund that particular activity. I think the benefit there is that you're not just throwing money at people, which I don't think works very well. Traditional forms of development haven't been great when you're just throwing money at local kind of institutions and organizations. A lot of that money just disappears. So the idea here is that the community begins saving for themselves for a particular goal that they have in mind, and then someone in an advanced economy can boost those savings by minting a particular Noah badge for them and issuing that to them.
I see. So over time, the interest earned through this badge is going to be coming from people in advanced economies. Is that generally the idea?
Well, I would say, I'd say initially it is, but actually when you think about it, and it's coming from anyone who's time rich. Now, I think it's worth considering not just from markets, but going a lot lower than that directly to the individual level. Because I think in everyone's lives, there are points that we're time rich, capital poor, and times where we're capital rich and time poor. And that, I think, will happen more and more. So I really want to bring individuals together rather than say like it's just going to be rich people paying for poor people. I don't see it that way. I think throughout our own lives, there are definitely times where you have more money and less money. Like or more time and less time. Like I can imagine, for example, that there are plenty of wealthy people in frontier economies that don't have the ability to easily sponsor or incentivize saving in their own community, not in a trustless manner, for example.
Right. Okay. So if I'm on Noah and I say I have $1,000 and I want to save, I want to earn income on it. Can you walk me through how that process happens from from what I see as the end user looking to earn on my savings?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So let's start with the fact that you don't have any money, right? I think that's a more interesting, because this is where I think earning is the first step, yeah, in this journey.
Right. Okay.
So if you haven't got any money at all, you get access to the NOAA application, and there'll be activities that you can pursue to earn points. And with the NOAA points that you earn, you can then swap them for a NOAA badge. Let's stick with the 10% APR on $1,000 cap for 90 days. So you've now got this badge, but you don't have any savings, let's say, at the moment. So one thing you could do is just swap that and you can put it on, that has an intrinsic value of $24.66. It's basically the APR applied to $1,000 over 90 days, right? So you could put that on the market for $5 and someone will buy it for that amount. So now you've got $5. Let's say you you get to the point that you've earned $1,000 now, but that $1,000, you're dipping in and out of that. So one of the things that you could do with a NOAA badge is to activate the reward. So you finally got a NOAA badge that's available for 90 days. You've got $1,000 for 2 weeks, but then you know that you're going to have to spend $500. What you can do with the NOAA badge is to turn off the reward. So while you have $1,000 in your account, you can earn rewards on it at the maximum rate, 10%, and then you can turn that off, spend $500. And then when you're back to $1,000, you can turn it on. So that way you can maximize the reward that you get for saving the maximum amount that you can set. And I think this is achieved because we're not locking up any funds here. It's kind of, because the token has been funded for upfront through the liquidity pool, we can give you that flexibility. We don't have to tell you you have to put it into a 90-day locked up account and we'll penalize you for taking your assets out earlier than 90 days. It won't work that way. You can just turn it off, turn the badge off, get on with your day, and then once you've back to $1,000, you can turn it back on and maximize the rewards that you earn.
Right. Do you have a sense for what that interest might look like at a steady state or in a mature level where you've got a bunch of people who are looking for interest? What would that demand look like, and how do you think about what rate you could offer, I guess?
Yeah, I think the rate that we can offer very much depends on the other attributes. So what is the cap on the badge? So is it going to be a rate on $10,000 or is it going to be a rate on $5? And the duration. How long is the certificate valid for? You can conceive that you could have a 5-minute 1,000 APR percent on $50 badge. Now, you can play around with this stuff. It gets interesting, and I think it will give us that flexibility. Means that we can tailor the product on an individual basis. Ultimately, it will start with tailoring it particular markets because we'll see trends depending on the overall behavior of a group of people in a particular region. But the value of the APR is really contingent on the cap and the duration of which the rewards can be applied.
Okay, I see. So this is really fascinating. Do I have a correct understanding when I say that it's built on Bitcoin and then the badge is built on kind of like a NOAA internal system right now? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. If I'm just for full transparency, while we're prototyping this, it's quicker to do it with, as I've said, like with a bank account and with our own minting technology. And basically, the certificate becomes you do have to trust Noah that we will honor that certificate. But this is while we are prototyping the whole concept. Ultimately, it will be the liquidity pool will be based on Bitcoin itself. The badge will be separate unless we can find a way, and maybe we can get in with Taproot, of minting certificates directly on the Bitcoin blockchain. But obviously, I'll pursue that approach if I can. I'm just not there yet at the moment. So we'll probably use. To be honest, it's either an internal ledger entry that we maintain on our ledger, the Noah ledger, which is not on a blockchain. Well, it's on a centralized blockchain, is a way of describing it. But ultimately, we would like to be able to mint those ideally on Bitcoin, but if we need to use another technology just to mint those certificates, as long as it's transparent and secure, I don't think there's that much issue with whatever technology that we do, because the certificate just represents whatever's available on the Bitcoin blockchain, and anyone can validate that publicly.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Now, you guys are also non-custodial, right? You're
Correct.
building this
Yes.
to not take custody of customer funds. Can you talk to me about what that thought process was and why this is so important?
Yeah, it's regulatory, number one. So here in the UK now, to operate a crypto asset business, you need a license from the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA. Now, I've gone through this process before. In a previous company that I worked for, we obtained an e-money institution license, which is like a neobanking license, and a 5 MLD, which is the fifth money laundering directive crypto asset license. So we are applying for those licenses, at least the 5 MLD one, not the e-money license. And that will allow us to pursue custodial products and services in the crypto asset space. Now, why would you want to do that? If I'm really honest with you, it's because the user experience is a lot better with custodial services. And for a lot of our market segment, I think as much as we would encourage anyone to go self-custodial, I think your keys, your crypto are kind of the goal for everyone eventually. Full sovereignty is the goal. But the reality on the ground and our experience of frontier and emerging markets is, and I hate to use this word convenience trumping kind of the sovereignty aspect, because convenience is a little bit of a weak word to use. Is it convenient that you can send money, or it takes you 8 hours to send money today and it may not arrive? Is that really convenience, or is that a matter of life and death? For some people, it's a matter of life and death. And custodial solutions make that really easy. Having said that, and we do want to pursue a custodial services eventually and make those available to those people that would want them. They'll be clearly marked as custodial and regulated services. But really, to get to market quickly, we have to go non-custodial. And that means the user experience is going to be a little bit tougher. But we've put in a lot of effort to try and manage that key process and the way that the customer signs the transactions to make it as simple as possible. And we are really giving a lot of thought to social recovery. I think that goes a long way in managing security for private keys. But our non-custodial wallet is based on MPC technology. So the reason why it's non-custodial is, philosophically, a lot of your audience may disagree with this, but from a regulatory standpoint, it's still non-custodial. The key isn't held by any single entity. So let me take a step back. If you look at the spectrum of custody, you have custodial solutions on one hand, self-custody on the other, and in between is non-custodial. That's the way I look at it from a regulatory perspective. If no single individual has access to the private key, it's non-custodial in a regulatory perspective. So by using multi-party compute and also an elliptic curve public-private key pair on the customer's device, we can ensure that we don't have the key, The customer authorizes everything using their public-private ECC pair, and our custodial service providers also don't have access to the key. Whenever we come to sign a transaction, we provide proofs of the key shards that we maintain in our custody. The custodial solution service provider provides their proof. The private key is never shared over the internet, only the proofs are on an internal kind of secured internet, and the customer approves in a non-reputable fashion the transaction. So that's how we maintain non-custody.
That's fascinating too, and it's a novel way of doing it. I haven't heard of many other apps taking this approach.
There are a couple of wallets that do. Yeah, there are a couple of wallets that have very similar approaches, and I think Zengo is one of them. Also, Wirex, I believe, are using a similar approach, and I'm sure some of the other big players are using similar approaches for their non-custodial wallets. And the key is here, I just want to be absolutely honest and open with everyone. It's a regulatory definition of non-custodialship, not necessarily a philosophical one that many in the Bitcoin community would agree with. But I think we just have to, as a commercial entity, and understanding the individuals that we're working with in these markets, we just believe that this is the best compromise we have at the moment to get into market without the regulatory burden that we would need to really provide what I think are going to be the best user experiences. I do genuinely think the best user experiences are custodial in nature.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. There's a lot more I want to talk about on the NOAA site, because I've gone through it a little bit and I've seen some of the teasers and some of the images you guys are posting right now. There's one screen on your site that mentions credit, and specifically like a little credit card icon on one of the screens. I want to hear more about this and how this might work, and how do you determine credit worthiness on Bitcoin and Lightning? Are you guys using over collateralized loans, or is it some kind of reputation system? I just have a ton of questions, so I'd love to hear more on the credit side of things.
Yeah, you've said a lot there that I think already resonates with me, right? So ultimately, I would, again, going back to our nature as being cryptech, not fintech, I would love to be able to offer a credit card without using Visa and MasterCard, which I've done in previous roles, right? I would love that. And we had brief discussion about maybe an NFC Lightning-based card. Now, if you can hook me up with the right people who can provide the hardware and the point-of-sale devices, I would definitely look at that. I mean, that's what really excited me about it. And there's a lot we can do to measure creditworthiness. We will over-collateralize kind of on our side. I think the credit will be managed in a way that, yes, over-collateralization is part of the story, but the NOAA points as well. We can start creating, for example, one of the things that we can do to establish creditworthiness is incentivize customers to link their social media accounts to NOAA. And that will allow us to at least have some idea of who they are. It's not necessarily institutional grade KYC, but at least it's voluntary, and it's just whatever information that the customer's already happy to put out into social media. So if you can imagine a situation where you've linked your Facebook and your LinkedIn account, maybe your verified Twitter account, that gives us a lot of confidence that we know who you are, which helps to kind of improve your credit score. But then there's also, we're building up a pattern of our customers' saving habits, which we're hopefully incentivizing the way that I've just described. That will go a long way to create an internal credit score for us as well. Ultimately, I think initially we just have to be careful that we can take a loss on credit. Initially, I think you have to step into this thinking, okay, credit is a great product. It definitely helps people in times of immediate need for cash. But there is a risk associated with it, and we have to price that in. In the early days, the risk is going to be high. And then over time, the risk gets lower and lower until you have a sustainable credit product. I would love for that to be on Lightning, frankly. That would be amazing.
Yeah, well, so I spoke with the team at Coin Corner in a previous episode, and they are releasing a NFC Lightning card, which I believe is pretty similar. I don't know, like to the concept that we're discussing now. Um, they have their own set of merchants as well, and so the Lightning
Right.
card you can use at any of the Coin Corner merchants, and it's just a payment over Lightning. It could come directly
Yeah.
from your node, even doesn't even have to come from your
Right.
custodial account at Coin Corner. And I just thought that was such a cool idea. It's still in my head. I still cannot shake this idea that when imagine if other businesses start to also enable this for their merchants and for their
Yeah.
users. Like right now, we've seen Square or Cash App has turned on Lightning integrations for the consumer side, but the business side, the merchant side at Square does not have Lightning integration yet. But I could see a world where there's a handful of companies that serve merchants, whether that's Square, whether that's Coin Corner's merchant side of the business, whether that's a handful of others. They can all turn on and accept Lightning payments, and then the Lightning payments can come from any card issued by any company that uses Lightning, right? So like it could be me using a Noah Lightning card at a Coin Corner merchant, and it works. Or it could be me using a Coin Corner Lightning card at a Square merchant, and it just works. And in that entire
And I
process,
think
there's no Visa, there's no
that
MasterCard.
and I think that's you need that kind of interoperability between and all of the partners on the Lightning network, because that's the only way that we're going to take market share from the incumbents. And I think that's the when if you try and from a traditional financial perspective take on these incumbents, you're going to fail. There's no way you will succeed. It will cost you far too much, because you're acting on your own. Essentially, you're just going to be another centralized service provider. You're acting on your own. You're disincentivizing anyone else to work with you to build the network. I think what Lightning's got going for it is this interoperability that you've just described is powerful, and I think that's why it definitely has a chance. It has a fighting chance to establish itself, despite of all of the barriers to adoption that exist today. Because if enough of us get together and interoperate with each other, and I think Lightning and the liquidity management structure that it has, it can also be used to incentivize this, depending on how you set your fees up and who you link to. Yeah, it definitely has a chance, and I think it could happen quicker than people imagine. I'm aware of potential projects in Southeast Asia for like taxi drivers to accept Lightning payments. And I think what's interesting there, and other similar sort of projects, what's really interesting there is the use of Lightning URL. And we're going to have a Lightning URL enabled wallet day one. And I think what I like about that, and I think also the Lightning standard is probably going to change anyway, where you can have a fixed address that you can accept payments to. That's a huge convenience rather than having to generate invoices on either side to send and receive payments. So addressing that issue will go quite a long way, and then having a Lightning URL as well, I think just it's a game changer in its own right. So we're really happy to support that standard. I think it's a big innovation in the Lightning space. I mean, I'd love to work with point-of-sale service providers and card manufacturers, and that's something hopefully you can hook me up with the right people, and we'll definitely look at partnering with them.
I'll see what I can do.
The other that'll be really appreciated. The other fascinating thing is, of course, cross-border payments. Now, the market for domestic remittance, I think, is really easy for Lightning. It becomes more challenging when you look at fiat to crypto cross-border remittance and the use of Bitcoin as a bridge currency. We've talked to a couple of colleagues in South America around kicking ideas around how we can provide liquidity to them in the form of sterling, and how they can provide liquidity in local fiat currencies, essentially, over Lightning. And that's something that's... I was in Tajikistan with Shah, our CEO, a few months ago now. It wasn't that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago. And there's the the remittance market for the external remittance market, the foreign exchange market for Tajikistan, is a country of 8 million people. 9 billion is the amount of the size of remittances mostly sent from Moscow to Dushanbe, so from Russia to Tajikistan. And the fees are extortionate. And the service isn't great. It could take a few days for the payment to be made. You've got to go to the usual suspects to make the payment. And fees can, ultimately, you're talking between 8 and 12% fees, not just the exchange fees, but all-in fees. And if you can reduce that fee to 1 or 1.5%, the amount of market segment that you can take very quickly with payments being made over Lightning, all that's really required there is the arrangements, the fiat on and off ramps in the two different countries. You need to make those arrangements. Unfortunately, there's no getting away from that. So it requires an exchange on either side and banking facilities on either side. But that's all it requires. Mm-hmm. The rest over Lightning is already built for you. And there's a real use case there. I think, when we run the numbers, you don't need to steal more than a few % market share to break even. So there's an opportunity there. It's just difficult to put into practice.
Yeah. How do you think companies should be going about approaching that problem? I know Strike has done it in a few countries so far, specifically in El Salvador, where they have the relationship in both El Salvador and the US and can make that remittance transfer. What do you think? What are the challenges to expanding that globally? Like, I don't know much about the fiat on and off ramp side of things in different countries and how those like regulations may get in the way. I imagine there's a reason why it hasn't been done so far, and that it's just a difficult problem. But can you shine some light on like what some of those challenges are and how we can kind of work to overcome them?
It's political will, if I'm to put it bluntly. So oddly enough, a lot of people don't know. I mean, we're in this community and we kind of eat, drink, and excrete Bitcoin and Lightning on a daily basis. But you'd be amazed how many people don't. I mean, when I was in Tajikistan, I was quite surprised at how many people don't even know what Bitcoin is. So part of it is the awareness is not at the right levels, and the political will won't exist until they're made aware in the first place. I think what NOAA can do, because of the partnerships that we have from our investors who have years of experience in operating some of these frontier markets, is that they can begin to have those discussions with senior political leaders and the political apparatus in those countries, so civil services that exist, just to make them aware that these opportunities that are available, they're available today, and all it takes is the political will to set up a proof of concept and to make some regulatory space to allow these new forms of remittance to be piloted. And I think the first step is just to run a pilot. So, if you are in a country and you have some, you can go and talk to your local representatives or someone at a more senior level. I think the ask has to be, can we have some some regulatory space in order to carry out a pilot that demonstrates that the numbers that we have calculated are real and the savings are real. And I think if you can get to that point, and that could be with the help of international organizations, or then I think the pilot will be successful. I don't doubt it, because we've seen it be successful. It's proven, and I think that's the way that we should be approaching this. It's the only way I can think of right now, to be perfectly honest.
Do you think the same kind of political and regulatory problem exists in making payments over, like, not remittances, but in day-to-day payments using like Visa or MasterCard? Do you think there's some like regulatory lock in there that Bitcoin has to get around, or is it okay?
Yeah, precisely that. Right? If you look,
go ahead.
How do we get around that?
Yeah.
I think, it's to create a pilot scheme. I think what you can't do is go in there and say, unless you're the president of El Salvador, you can't normally just go in there and say, look, we're going to set up shop and execute this function. I think what you can do is ask for that regulatory space. So you say we want to create a pilot program. We've done the feasibility study. We know what the technology is, and we've identified local partners that we can work with. So either exchanges or banks that already exist, and they may be fiat exchanges, existing forex exchanges. You need to find those partners on the ground. With those partners, you then ask for some space to carry out a pilot scheme. And very importantly, there has to be a next step. You're not just doing a pilot for the sake of it. If the pilot is successful, you need agreement from those regulatory bodies that you can move to the next step. And that next step may be going from 5,000 people in a proof of concept in one town to, can we roll this out in a region, in a state? And then if that goes successful and you meet those quality gates and those benchmarks, then you have to kind of lock in what the next step is every time. Otherwise, the problem will be you'll probably get your pilot because no one's paying any attention to what you're doing, but it will die there. It won't go forward, and you get stuck again in like years of negotiations.
Right. So in a world where Lightning is the solution, let's say, for day-to-day payments and for remittances around the world, and a lot of these intermediaries are disrupted and a lot of fees get passed on to customers and to people all over the world, what do you think? Do you think there are any interesting second-order effects that will come from that, from passing fees on to people? What does that lead to? What are the things that people are not thinking about when someone in any country in the world can get a payment instantly and for free from any other country in the world?
The narrative that I see here, and it's a really challenging one, I'm obviously not the only one, and I'm fascinated by people who have observed and talked about the phenomenon, which is basically separation of money and state. And that it's not trivial. If you look at the Reformation, it was a bloody mess for several hundred years. We need to that's the last time a function was wrestled from the state, i.e. religion was separated from the state. So the timeline I'm looking at is basically one where individual sovereignty is increasing slowly and in fits and bursts. And I think we've reached a point where if we separate money from state, it's the most maximum sovereignty we've ever achieved for the individual. Now, it's not going to be easy, and I think some states might blindly walk into it without realizing what they're doing. But to be honest, most of the nation states do communicate with each other quite well. So I think, the separation of money from the state isn't going to be easy, and the second order effects are going to be colossal. They're going to be as big as the Reformation, if not bigger, because there's more people alive today and there's more technology available to do more. So now I just hope it can be carried out peacefully. To be honest, that's my main concern is because I don't see it not happening. I just cannot see the juggernaut being stopped at this stage. You can't stop Bitcoin. It's demonstrably. Right. Maybe even if you make a quantum computer, I don't think you're going to stop it because we can change the algorithm in Bitcoin users for consensus to overcome a quantum computer. That can be done. So if it can't be stopped, how are you going to deal with it? And I hope that it will be a case of the state slowly losing sovereignty to the individual. Because right now, I also think states have way more power than they've ever had historically. So it's not a bad thing that we give individuals more sovereignty whatsoever. How that plays out, though, I have no idea. I just hope it's as peaceful as possible.
Right. Do you think there's a way for states to make this transition to giving power back to people without first going through the issues of hyperinflation or some crisis? Like, do you think there's a peaceful handoff possible? Is there a precedent for that? Or is it just going to be like one country or a few countries get way into a hyperinflationary environment, people push back and kind of, take their own course? That's
a fascinating question. Is there precedent for it? I'm not aware, if I'm honest with you. I mean, the nearest we have is El Salvador today. That's the nearest. And we haven't reached the point where inflation has really caused the cat isn't 100% out of the bag. I mean, people are suffering, but it hasn't exploded yet. We're not in the Weimar Republic or in Zimbabwe yet. And as long as that situation can be avoided, then you can argue that the pressure for the final change is not there, although the juggernaut continues to keep moving forward. So we've got to watch what happens in El Salvador, and I'm sure in other countries, because it's only a matter of time that I think other countries will, alongside their own shitcoins, accept Bitcoin. And maybe the peaceful way, the only peaceful kind of resolution here is that you never get away from the fiat currency. And I had this debate with people online. I don't think the US dollar is ever going away. I don't think the Iranian rial will ever go away. As long as there's a nation state with a border, then it will demand taxes be paid in its local currency. I think what will happen, though, maybe the balance situation is that most people will use that to pay whatever they owe the state, but for everything else they'll use Bitcoin. And I can see that, and effectively Bitcoin being a bridge asset as well, the money of the world. I can see that situation. I think that's within the realms of possibility. And the weakening, while the state doesn't lose its fiat currency, it will be so weak. One situation is it will be so weak that no one really uses it for anything other than paying taxes, and they're happy to do so because they're paying less taxes year on year as it gets inflated away. Or actually the local currency will strengthen and we get better governance. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath for that one, but maybe lawmakers will be actually elected into power because they understand that they have to keep money, but they have to have tight fiscal policy, otherwise Bitcoin will kick them out. That could have
Right. Yeah, it's just like a check on sanity, making sure that there's not insane money printing going on, and keeping the economy in check in a sense.
Yeah, and if they do insanely print money, then your liabilities to the state go down anyway. You don't care because you hold Bitcoin.
Right. But now, if you're the state, don't you think that over time, if Bitcoin, this juggernaut, continues to roll on and it grows to a $10 trillion, $100 trillion asset, isn't there a certain point at which the state decides we would actually rather have taxes paid in Bitcoin rather than the local currency? Yeah. Like, what would then the benefit be of being the state of receiving taxes in the local currency?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. What would the benefit be? Maybe it does go to zero eventually. Maybe they do get destroyed. And I think Michael Saylor said this, that we start with like the maybe 5 currencies remaining. The Iranian rial disappears, whatever other shitcoin currency people have disappears, and then you're left with the US dollar because everyone wants that already. But you've got to ask the question, why do people want the US dollar? Is to pay for it's the petrodollar. So that's why people really, I mean, it's a bit more than that. International trade is conducted in USD, but that's reducing now as well. So I could even foresee a point where no one would want to hold the US dollar anymore. So yeah, maybe that is the final step. It's just, I guess if the progression is slow, it could be peaceful. If it happens quickly, I can't see it being peaceful.
Right. Now, do you think we're at the stage in the Bitcoin and Lightning space to accommodate a fast transition? Like maybe this is like not a peaceful transition, but if a country defaults on their debt, or if we see a real bad hyperinflation episode in another country, and citizens decide they want another option, do you think we've, in the Bitcoin community, done enough to educate people and done enough to like bridge the gap between what exists today in the fiat system and the Bitcoin system? Or is this going to be like a slow trickle?
I think you'd be amazed at how many people don't even know Bitcoin exists. For us, we're kind of dumbfounded when we're just 1 or 2% of the population, literally, of the planet. There's so many people that don't even know that Bitcoin, never mind Lightning, exists. Or now, how quickly that's changing, it is changing very quickly. And I think, to your point, if there's a cataclysmic event where more than one country defaults at the same time, then yeah, I can see that acting as a massive catalyst for the adoption of Bitcoin and Lightning by ordinary people. What do they need to do that? They need access to the internet. So we know the next billion people are about to join the internet. That's happening. If they've got an internet connection, they need to be aware that Bitcoin exists. They need to, once they're aware Bitcoin exists, I think they'll take the same route as all of us have taken, which is suddenly we understand what money is. So you go down that road of educating yourself, because all of it's done on the internet anyway. I think as long as you speak English, you're probably in a good place. Maybe translating the Bitcoin standard into a number of other languages will help quite a lot as well. But I think if you've got access to the internet and you learn about Bitcoin, you educate yourself pretty quickly, and then from then on, what can stop you? The only thing is the convenience or the ability to actually buy goods and services using Bitcoin, and that's what Lightning fixes. So I think if we can establish a presence in a number of different countries. So if I had a lot of money to spend on Lightning adoption, I would start rolling out pilot programs in as many of the larger economies and the better internet connected economies as possible. So sow those seeds, and then if you do have a cataclysmic event, people will run into it in droves, and you'll be ready to accommodate the demand.
Yeah. Are there any specific tactics or ideas you're playing with at NOAA to make it easier for people to eventually adopt Bitcoin when they realize the time is right?
That's a wonderful question, and it goes back to the whole idea around NOAA points, and it is to incentivize behaviors that we think are going to be, or we believe will provide better life outcomes for people. So for us, it's a case of, let's give this a lot of thought. What can we do that if you have 5 people who have NOAA wallets, let's say in a town of 10,000 size, what can we do to help those 5 people help themselves and spread the word? How does that work? And I think there are precedents, there are good approaches for viral growth for any kind of mobile application. The thing that we have to be careful about is making sure that viral growth is ethical in the first place. So I take a lot of inspiration from GameFi. I think the stuff that Axie Affinity, for example, have done, and there's no doubting when you read and see pictures of families in the Philippines playing these games, eventually buying their own homes. That's a real news story. I think that's a viable thing that should be celebrated. I just wonder if we can give them more choice than playing games. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's up to them, and it gets them from A to B. It's their decision, their choice, and I'm glad that the opportunity exists. But I just wonder, from NOAA perspective, is there something else that we can do other than playing games that could be more productive for the local community? And this is where I think, rather than trying to solve that problem, I don't want to guess what's important for someone in Ethiopia. What I prefer to do is incentivize saving and give them a vehicle to solve their own problems. And I think this is what we hear over and over and again from our experience in frontier markets, especially for people in Nigeria who seem to be further ahead than any other nationality that I've spoken to. The message is just give us the tools and we know what our problems are, we'll fix them. Don't tell us what problems we have and what you want us to fix. Just give us the tools and we'll do it. So I think that actually relieves us of a great burden when we're not trying to solve other people's problems, but instead we give them the means of solving it themselves. And all we do is incentivize what we believe to be a universally good behavior that's going to improve life outcomes, which is saving.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can argue that saving is a bad thing. We should all be saving more. That's part of Bitcoin's philosophy.
Right. Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I agree. I think we've corrupted the idea of saving almost especially in the last 10 years. But you can trace it all the way back to 1971 or the creation of the Fed in 1913. You can trace back as far as you want, I guess. But what do you think some of the implications will be once people start saving? What do you think that does to society? Do you think we're going to see broad sweeping changes? I know this is something that guys like Saifedean in his book, The Bitcoin Standard, talk about how there's going to be just these broad sweeping changes as a result of lowered time preference. Any idea what you think some of those early changes might look like?
So it will definitely be a renaissance. I think, the creativity will go through the roof. Now, what does that mean? Let's define technology first, because I'm a technologist, I'm a career technologist, and I like to ask people what they think technology is. So, Kevin, can I ask you what you think? What is technology? What's your definition of technology?
I would say it is a tool to make life simpler, or some new tool or some way of improving some aspect of my life, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. For me, technology is that which increases the ability and capability of human action, very specifically. And so it could give you the ability to fly, and then it can give you the capability of flying supersonically. Now, if we free up time and allow people to pursue their own interests, they'll very quickly kind of realize, I think, that the creativity that they can unleash. And that will be across all spheres of human endeavor. So I definitely imagine it would be something akin to a renaissance, where suddenly we fix a lot of problems that we should have fixed earlier and we could have fixed earlier. What can you say? Building cities in the sea. I don't know. Like building cities on the moon, colonizing the rest of the solar system. The space is the limit, I guess. I'm very, very optimistic that if we solve this problem, we solve so many other problems. There will be a group of people, though, that will not be very happy about it. I think it's a societal problem. To your point, when you disintermediate the financial system, you are disintermediating an awful lot of people who work there, and they'll be scared. There'll be a healthy dose of fear, I think, in a lot of people, because their 9-to-5s doing mundane, useless tasks, they won't have that to fall back on. And many people, they identify with their jobs as well. It's part of what they do. And we have to tackle that. I think we can't just ignore it. If we want this venture to turn out peacefully and in an equitable way for the majority of people that participate in it, then we have to think about what happens to all these people that we disintermediate from dying industries, dying financial sector, for example. And I'm hoping the creativity that's unleashed initially by the first portion of people that liberate themselves from the fiat standard will go a long way in helping to alleviate the concerns for the rest of the, let's say, 95% of the population that follows. Let's hope that's the case.
Interesting. So here's a question for you. If you were the CEO at Western Union or PayPal or Visa, and it was up to you to make sure you didn't get intermediated and that your business didn't fall apart in the face of Bitcoin and Lightning adoption, what are some of those actions you would take today? Like how would you reposition the business, knowing that you have an income stream today that's keeping your business alive, but you know that that's going away in the future?
Wow. I would hope if I was in that position, I would do what I will tell you I'm going to do now, which is embrace the change and outpace the competition in developing it, basically. I don't see an alternative. I think it's hubris, and maybe it's human nature. And that, look, if I'm being really kind to the executive team at one of these payments institutions that you described, I would say that their biggest, maybe they're thinking about the damage it's going to cause to their, not just the bottom line, but their employees as well. And they have this income stream coming in, and they decide that, look, we can't get rid of 50% of our staff tomorrow because we adopt Lightning. Like, how can we do that? But the reality is, I think it's going to happen. and they should be embracing the change. It goes, I think it goes directly back to the question that we asked earlier. So what happens? Well, I think you have a very efficient organization, and you have to think about, well, what can we do to educate people to use these new payment rails? And maybe you can assign a big chunk of your workforce to that task of education and adoption of these new technologies. And then maybe while they're in that process, they actually think of some new things to do. Because I doubt these people are thinking very hard about the future. I think they're fairly comfortable where they are, and they're working hard to keep the rails on, because let's face it, these traditional cross-border remittance rails are very hard work. They require constant monitoring. Liquidity management is an absolute nightmare. They've set up very sophisticated systems to manage liquidity globally. When that disappears, what are you going to do with these people? But I think that you have to embrace the change. It's coming. So the further it's coming, as we say at NOAA, you can't really stand in front of it. You can just get onto the arc.
Right. So how do you view competition at NOAA? Do you view some of the traditional payment processors as competitors, or are you looking more at Square and Cash App and that kind of competitor, or do you think you're kind of in a new sphere?
I think Square and Cash App we draw inspiration from. The markets that we're operating in are huge. There is room for more than one player. Let's be absolutely clear about that. So, they're definitely inspiration. We think we can certainly be able to compete in certain areas at the same level with these organizations. As I said to you earlier, within earning, saving, sending, and paying, there are competitors in all of those product segments for us. Our growth may be predicated on taking market share from some of those competitors, but actually I think our growth is going to be, a lot of it is going to be organic and not directly competing. Certainly not with the global entities immediately. More inspiration rather than competition at this stage.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. I want to finish this off with hearing some of the Lightning applications or Bitcoin applications that you find exciting outside of NOAA. Anything that in particular comes to mind?
I would love to be able to, I think we can do so much more with the Bitcoin ledger. I think we can do an awful lot more with it. I think a lot of the innovation that we're seeing, let's say on Ethereum or some of these other technologies. And look, I'm a maximalist, but I'm not a toxic maximalist. I've been using Bitcoin a long time, so I don't need lectures from toxic maximalists on Bitcoin. But I think we do need to invest more in the core ledger, and we do need to invest in layer 2. There's a lot we could be doing around smart contracts, around minting of NFTs, for example. I think rather than just aping what's happened in that space, pardon the pun, but I think we can think about new products and services that can live directly or on layer 2 or even layer 3, but use Bitcoin as their core security and transparency infrastructure. So I think the future is bright for Bitcoin. We just need to be a little bit more imaginative about it. Like I said, the Lightning URL is the kind of thing that where we put convenience, where we focus on consumer convenience, I think that's going to keep Bitcoin very relevant for a broader number of people. Because again, to be clear, I think it's won the money argument. No one should be arguing against Bitcoin as the soundest money. It's not Ethereum, that's for sure. It's not other technologies that I don't think you can even compare with Bitcoin, to be perfectly honest, not as a money. But in terms of other financial instruments, Bitcoin can be leveraged to create other financial instruments, and it should be, because I think that gives those financial instruments an edge. What those are, I'm hoping one of them is the lowest savings incentives, which will come up with a better name for that, once we migrate it onto a fully Bitcoin-backed blockchain. But yeah, I imagine it will be kind of products like that.
Interesting. Well, I'm really excited for this launch. Thank you so much for taking the time today to discuss what you're building at Noah and the future of Bitcoin and Lightning. Really fascinating discussion, and wishing you all the best with the launch and the rollout of Noah.
Thanks, Kevin. Get onto our Discord and Telegram groups if you're not already on there. I try and
where can people go to find out more about Noah?
Yeah, I mean, the best place is just go to the website, scroll to the bottom, and I think there are links to Discord and Telegram. And we're all active on Discord more than Telegram, but we'll be on both. And if you want the latest information on what's going on, that's the place to find us. We're in beta internal testing right now, so the whole team is testing our M1 release. The details of what's in that release are on Discord. And hopefully we'll be opening up to the first batch of friends, family, and founder members in the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to see how everything works, give us your feedback, we'll fix bugs, no doubt there'll be loads of them. And then we'll launch soon after that.
Awesome. I'll check out the Discord. Thanks again for taking the time.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kevin. It's been a real pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend. Cheers.
You too. Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Many of the apps and services you already use in the Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem already use Voltage to scale their business quickly and easily without any maintenance. Voltage also offers an inbound liquidity product called Flow that helps you as a node operator get inbound liquidity quickly and easily. Overall, Voltage is creating the industry standard of non-custodial products, helping brands and startups and entrepreneurs scale. To learn more about Voltage, visit voltage.cloud.
All right, let's get into it now. This was a record week for sats sent into the show. It was another huge week of supporters and messages. We had 8 different supporters send in sats this week, 5 sent in messages, and 6 shows were boosted this week. 6 different episodes of the Kevin Rooke Show. Quick rundown of the top supporters this week. Coming in at number 1 with a record high payment, TKMIMICE, that's the username, 199,000 sats sent in. That is by far the largest amount of sats anyone has sent in to this show to date. Second place is Mary Oscar, who has sent in 3,465 sats in the last 7 days. BTC Rich, who has sent in 1,683 sats in the last 7 days. BitSpooky, who has sent in 990 sats, and J24, who has sent in 701 sats in the last week. That's the bar. That's the level it takes now. That bar continues to rise. If you want to be in the top 5 every week, it's now 701 sats is the bar to beat. Let's go through the comments. First one comes in from TKMIMICE, and this is Tom. I was on Tom's podcast earlier today, and Tom sent a message, said, "Thank you for sharing on our podcast today." We were talking about Lightning podcasting, and so Tom sent in 198,000 sats with that question. Thank you, Tom, for the enormous boost. That's by far the biggest one I've received. It's pretty close to one of the biggest ever sent on Fountain. I believe the biggest boost ever sent is 570,000. So 198,000 for a single boost is pretty high up there in terms of Lightning podcasting. Next comment comes in from BitSpooky, and BitSpooky says, "Brilliant episode, excellent," in response to episode 19 with Andre Neves. Andre was great in that episode. If you have not seen it already, definitely check it out. It's already one of the most popular episodes of the entire show. BTC Rich had the same sentiment. It's a great listen. Love the currency preference idea in the Lightning address. LNURL is winning the customers over. I couldn't agree more. BTC Rich also sent in their Lightning address for a shootout with Raven. Unfortunately, I saw this message after publishing the last episode where I gave away 1900 sats to Raven. But what we're doing this week is another Voltage node giveaway. If you would like a free month on Voltage, you can send in your email address or your Twitter handle, some way for me to reach out to you, and I will give you a coupon for a free month on Voltage. So you can send that over the Lightning Network. Next comment comes in from African BLC. It says, Kevin, this show was great, and this is response to episode 18 with Keegan McClelland. Like you, I learned tons. Thanks for the great podcast. Keep it up. Thank you for the sats, African BLC. If there's any guests you'd like to see featured in future episodes, let me know. Send in some comments. Send in some guest ideas. I'm always looking for new guests. Finally, J24 says, as a podcaster, do you see the timestamps of boosts, as in what part of the episode I'm at when I hit it? Yes, J24, I do. I see the timestamp, I see the episode, I see the amount of sats. Fountain's got a great dashboard for all this stuff. This is by far the easiest way for a podcaster to check out what is happening on their feed in terms of Lightning Network payments and messages. So yes, I can see all your comments, the exact timestamps. I can categorize them. I can sort by weekly, monthly. I can sort by 3 months, all time. I got dashboards to see income levels. It's a really cool dashboard for podcasters. If you are on the Lightning Network, I highly suggest you use Fountain to manage your podcasting, your Lightning podcasting. So as I just mentioned, this week what we're doing is, if you would like a free month on a Voltage node, send in a comment over the Lightning Network with your email address or your Twitter handle, and I will pick one winner and I will send them a coupon for a free month of Voltage. Can't wait to see all your comments and questions this week, and I'll talk to you soon.